A few successful entrepreneurs up here, purpose-driven entrepreneurs, and I wanted to ask them some questions and share some of their stories of overcoming and challenges. So we'll kind of go around the panel, and I'll ask some questions, and this is for you guys to think about some of these things. You can take notes, whatever sticks with you, can stick with you. So day 5 specifically is the first time God says, be fruitful and multiply. And so the focus of this is, how do you multiply your calling? Once you have that idea, once you have that seed, once you've written it down, how do you then take it to the next level and start to multiply it? So we'll start with Rachel, if you want to give a quick introduction, your background, and then we'll go around the panel.
As Sam said, my name's Rachel, and I run an online platform for churches to take their classes that they offer and offer them 24/7 to people. I have a background in web development and ministry, and so this is kind of like the perfect hybrid of those two things. And so, yeah, it's been a lot of fun growing it in this season and stepping into bigger things.
How old were you when you started your first business?
11.
Okay, great. Matthew.
Hi, I'm Matthew Hayes, the founder of Orange August Pictures, a videography company and a photography company working with inspired brands to create content. Yeah.
And Matthew just graduated from Divergent University. If we could give him a huge round of applause. You'll see his video in the next segment. I'm Sam, I'm founder of Divergent University. I started my first business about 15 years ago, which was a basketball company called Hoop Brothers. The goal was to help my brother get a scholarship for college. He ultimately achieved that. And then we ended up helping tens of thousands of players throughout the country, producing videos, hiring videographers. So I scaled Hoop Brothers nationally, exited that company in 2023. And so I've now spent the last several years building Divergent University. So I've written 10 books, on personal development, business development, leadership development, had graduates from the program go through Divergent U. If you've seen that QR code on the package you were handed out, that's going to link to Divergent U's website, so you can learn all about that through that link. That's a little bit about my backstory.
My name is Tiger Tarell. Sam's my brother. If I say I'm his brother, no.
I'm his brother.
I founded the Balance of Gaia with Sam and his support. Before that, I tried to be a music producer. That didn't go so well. Before that, Sam also helped me get into college to play basketball. And there, I learned, I took design, which helped me a lot in the Balance of Gaia, and eventually just fell in love with the idea once I had it, because it was a really cool combination of art and nature and math and all the things I was passionate about. So like you were saying, Rachel, it was just a good combination of my passions. Yeah.
Alex.
Hi, I'm Alex, and I'm a professional engineer. I'm a full-time civil engineer, but in 2019 I started a permanent makeup business, and it became very successful. I became one of the top nanobrow artists in the United States. And now I'm focusing on building a real estate development company that basically changes the way that you live by dedicating 20% of your entire home into a space that consolidates all of the highest health yielding amenities, such as sauna, cold plunge, fully custom gym, so that you can make your health convenient.
Give them all a quick round of applause. So I've worked with hundreds of entrepreneurs, and one of the most common questions I get is, how do I start? And I actually find that starting is a lot easier than you think. Starting is the moment you write it down. It's the moment you say it out loud. It's the moment you tell somebody else. The question then becomes, how do you continue? How do you take that next right step? So if you've written it down, if you took the actions from that last segment, or if you take some more time with that and write those ideas down, you've already started. You've already put it on the page. You've already put it out there in the world. The next step is starting to talk to people about it. And so starting is the easy part. It's how do you then continue to pour, like Sasha was talking about, how do you pour your potential into that repeatedly? How do you overcome things when it gets hard? So I'd love to reflect that to all of you, anybody who wants to jump in. How do you stay the course when it gets difficult?
Faith. Stay faithful. I mean, if you see the vision and you know what the end goal is, then it's like, I think Pastor JJ at Journey said something about this one time. It's like if you're following your GPS and you know what the destination is, you can take a wrong turn, but it's going to guide you back to the destination. I think it's the same, I think that was beautifully put. I think it's the same way with your goals. If you know what the destination is, then it's just having faith that, like, I'm going to be at this point. Regardless how it takes to get there, whatever road I have to take, this is the end goal and this is where we're going to be at.
I think your passions just find a way, as well as faith. I think it's faith through consistency. But I often find that whatever I'm passionate about pulls me in that direction and makes me give it another try. And it's through faith and through consistency is where I'm able to stay the course.
Yeah, I think I would also add flexibility to that. Like, you have to be flexible with it. Sometimes you're going to take a different route than you were expecting. Sometimes you get to take the toll roads, and sometimes you got to take the back roads, and it's going to take a little bit longer to get there, but the flexibility to allow it to change and shift and grow over time, I think, is super important. Not to hold on so tightly that it has to look one specific way in every season.
I think systems as well, because there's always times where you lose your motivation or your willpower, you just want to quit. But I think that creating the behaviors, and in order to do that, it requires like the 4 laws of behavior change, which is number 1, make it obvious. For example, like writing down a checklist or something visible that you can see. Law number 2 is make it easy, make it in the simplest form possible so that there's no friction. Law number 3 is you make it attractive, because when you make it attractive, basically you're making the process pleasurable, you're associating something positive to it. And then the 4th law is you make it satisfying. So for example, you give yourself a reward, or I don't know, ice cream, whatever that is, but you make it so that it's an achievement. So as long as it follows those 4 laws, you can pretty much change or create a new habit that's going to help you stay the course.
I think to add to that, it's a lot about patterns. And so like we act out similar patterns. That's why when we were writing that out, what's your morning routine? What's your evening routine? You might not have a very intentional morning or evening routine, and that's fine, but you do something every day when you wake up. That's typical. That's your typical pattern. It's how do you change that pattern and shift that pattern? When you're setting goals, how do you change or shift those patterns? And one thing that I've found that is very effective to change those patterns is placing yourself in environments where others are doing that too. And so finding places where in an environment like this, you're around other people who want to forward the thing that they're called to forward. And so everybody here has a purpose. Everybody here is driven for something. And so when you're in an environment where others are ambitious, where others are setting goals, where others are breaking those and changing those patterns, it allows you to change those patterns too. So just think about the environment as well, and how do you immerse yourself in those environments where you can shift the pattern. So another thing I hear a lot is failure. People are afraid to fail. Afraid, what if I fail? What if I don't accomplish it? What will other people think if I'm not able to do the thing that I said I wanted to do? And I want to reframe that a little bit, because I think failure isn't real in the sense that you can hit a point where you don't accomplish it, but you can still try again. And so it's once we get to the point where we quit that becomes the failure, quote unquote. But it's more about taking, when you think about taking risks, I think what Tiger mentioned about having faith, risk is a worldly idea, faith is a spiritual idea. And so when you're thinking about taking a risk, from a spiritual perspective, God is not worried about the worldly risk. If there's a calling that's placed on your heart, that's a calling that's placed on your heart for a reason. And so follow through on that calling, because if it was placed there, it was placed there so that it could be you to forward that and bring that forward. And so don't think about the failure or the risk, focus on the purpose or focus on the calling. And so for each of you, I'm curious, what are some moments that felt like it could have been failure, but you kept going?
Well, with the Balance of Gaia, we had to dissolve, I mean, the LLC got dissolved at one point. We released our first set. Shout out Jess, actually, who supported us in that. We failed. I mean, we tried to sell it. It didn't sell well. I was bad at marketing. I'm still not great at marketing. But ultimately, it didn't work out the way I envisioned it. The LLC got dissolved, and I didn't take that as like an end. It was just like, okay, so this didn't work and that didn't work. How can I reapproach this differently? And so I just reestablished the LLC, and we just re-released again. So like you said, it's only a failure if you quit at that point and say, okay, I'm done. But if you keep going, it's never really a failure. It's just lessons.
I started Onarch in 2020, and I was working for a company at the time, and then in 2021 that business kind of dissolved, and so for 2022 I was all in on Onarch, and it was not making enough money for me to be all in on Onarch, and so I spent that year really working hard to try and bring it to life, and it just wasn't quite taking. And so then I ended up going into full-time ministry in 2023, and I think while Onarch kept going in the background, it felt a little bit like a failure in that it felt like, I was really trying to make this thing happen and it's not happening, and I see the potential and I know people need it, and it's just not working. And at the same time, I felt God calling me into something new for a season, and so I stepped into that, having faith that, God was going to lead, and like I said, being flexible. And literally 3 months ago, God was like, okay, your time in ministry has come to an end, and it's time to go back to Onarch full time. And I left my job last Thursday, or 2 days ago was my last day. And so this is like a crazy time. When Sam approached me, I was like, this is going to be a weird weekend of like finishing a job and then coming and talking about this. And I feel like, I could have seen that going and getting another job as a failure, but instead just felt like it was a redirection for a moment, and God was still calling me to pursue that behind the scenes to get to a place where I can do it full time now, which is pretty amazing.
I guess for me, failure was just being said no. I mean, very, very early on in my business, I was pitching around door to door, quite literally, to stores in Winter Park, videography, and it felt like a whole bunch of no's or maybes, and it was every other person being like, we already have a videographer. And for me, it just felt like defeat. It didn't feel like failure, but it did. I mean, at that moment, it just felt like horrible defeat. And I then tried to record a video in Mead Gardens around the area, and that didn't go as expected. And so I kind of felt like just bogged down, and like, just being told no by everyone and just being embarrassing to myself. And after that, and after just looking at the recordings that I have made, it wasn't so much failure, it was trying, and I was inspired by my own, weirdly enough, failure. It was like, I'm gonna do better. Like, it's only, if it's downhill from here, that's great, but like, I wanna try again. And so it was just kind of getting back on your horse, or whatever you call it, and just trying again, because, expecting another no is one thing, but, hoping for another yes is probably, it just kept me going. And I was, I'm very inspired by my own failure.
I think for me, one of the biggest failures that I had was when I decided to quit my 9 to 5 and pack my things and move to Florida with nothing secure, just the 401k that I had pulled out, which was $12,000. And a few months into living in an apartment, I had almost no funds. So I had to think really fast, what was I gonna do? How was I gonna make a living? I made the bold move of being a full-time entrepreneur and thinking I'm gonna make so much money just being my own boss, but it was a realization that, okay, now I need to pivot, I need to generate income, so what am I gonna do? And I realized that my permanent makeup business that had taken me 3 years to build in California, and at the time generated more money than the engineering career that I had, was not gonna hit in Florida where I knew 0 people. So I made a plan to travel back to California, and I kept going back, and that's how I was sustaining myself and paying my bills for a while. But then it became very exhausting and I burned out, and I almost quit until I started working with Jess. She saved my life. And she said, what if you did trainings? So I started, instead of just doing eyebrows, which I charged anywhere at the time, like $500 to $600, I started doing trainings, and people were paying me $2,500, $2,800 for a training. So it became very lucrative. But then I came to the same point again. It was like a circle where I burned out again from traveling to California and doing these trainings. And then I realized that it wasn't my calling, it wasn't my purpose. And I knew that I had to go back to engineering. So 80/20 Home, the business that I started to change the way people live at home, I felt like there was something there that recently I had this realization that if I just kept focusing on the eyebrows, going back and doing trainings, God wasn't going to fulfill that purpose that He had for me. So just recent failures that I've had, I've launched flyers and generated very little leads, and $2,000 that went to those flyers, I generated 2 leads, versus just a few weeks ago, those same $200, which was 10% of that, generated almost 30 leads, which was great. So it's constantly just getting, just get your feet wet, just do it, just take the action. You're gonna fail, accept it, but it's gonna give you so much valuable information. And failure is not failure, like Sam said. Failure is a signal for you to do something and try something different.
Yeah, I've been a full-time entrepreneur for about 15 years now, and there's been seasons or years where we've had multiple 6 figures of revenue, and there's been seasons or years where we've had multiple 6 figures of loss. It's not one way, and so even success, you're not going to reach it and then just be at that point. You're going to have to constantly change. And something that I've seen as a consistent breakthrough is changing your identity. And by that I mean, identify as an entrepreneur. I am a business owner. When I started writing books, I had to say I am an author, and that means I write every day. And since then I've written 10 books. And so I didn't write books before that. That wasn't something that I was aspiring even to do at the time. But by shifting that identity to say, no, I am an entrepreneur, I am an author. What does an author do? I write books. What does a business owner do? You build business. And that means it's not going to be a point where you reach a success and you just made it. It means you have to constantly change and iterate and adapt, because the world changes and competition shows up or a new idea appears, and it's more about being able to stay focused and stay the course than reaching a one-time success that just you made it. It doesn't work that way. So I think that leads into our last question here, and then we might have some time for audience questions. So perfectionism. tends to hold a lot of us back. We want it to be perfect before we show it to the world. And so if it's not perfect, then it's not good enough, then nobody can see it. But the challenge with that mindset is that you don't ever get feedback. You don't ever get to build together. You're isolated, you're trying to build it alone. And so when you're in a perfectionist mindset, you're not able to even get feedback on the idea. So you might spend so much time trying to perfect it, but the truth is it's never going to be perfect. It's always going to be imperfect in some way. And so something that I've found difficult is stabilizing imperfection. You can create consistency around stable imperfection more than the constant pursuit of perfection. Because if you're trying to make it perfect before you put it out in the world, it's never going to be perfect. And so continue to improve, but don't wait for it to be perfect to put it out in the world. So I'm curious how you have navigated that challenge of how do you stay consistently improving where you have that perfectionism, where you want it to be good, but then also stabilizing and being consistent. Any thoughts on that?
I would say, for me, you were a big help in ways that I didn't like. Because I am definitely, or at least was, a perfectionist when creating the Balance of Gaia. And just part of what took so long was that I wanted every little piece to be perfect. And it really helped to have somebody who would say, who I could show it to and would be honest. And you would give honest feedback and say, you know what, this could maybe be like this could maybe be like that. And if I, like you said, if I had just tried to build the whole thing without getting any feedback, I probably would have messed a bunch of it up, trying to be a perfectionist. So I think the biggest thing is surround yourself with people that are honest. Like, surround yourself with friends and business partners that will tell you and give you real feedback. It might hurt. It might be like, what do you mean? I just worked a year on this. Like, it's still not right, but that's going to help you kind of get out of that perfectionism and be able to see it from multiple lenses, I think.
Yeah, I think for me is I had this whole big idea of perfectionism in my head, just wanted everything to be perfect, every video that I had to be perfect. And what I had to realize is that you can't hold something you haven't created sacred yet. Like, you can't say this is going to be a masterpiece and haven't even created anything yet. I think that you hear from artists, whether that be musicians or a director, who says that this is their most well-respected film or song. It's their least favorite. They didn't strive for perfection. They got feedback from it, and apparently it was everyone else's favorite. You're never going to really, never going to release, reach perfection, and even if you do, in other people's eyes, you're not gonna see it unless you do it.
I agree with both of you, and I agree with Tiger especially. Sam has definitely been that voice in my head. He's still that voice in my head. He's like, just do it. He yells at me all the time, but in the most loving way. But I think it's about community, but it's also about accountability of like setting a goal. I think one of the things that's been pivotal in this season is like being very clear about like what this season is and what I'm looking to do. And that means that I don't get to do some of the other things that I want to do or the things that I want to perfect. I don't have time. I can't look at the code that I wrote anymore because it's awful, but it's functional and it works and people love my product. And if I change the code, almost no one's going to even notice. And so that's not where I need to spend time right now. And so I need to set goals that are very clear for myself of like, okay, I'm not trying to code something better. I'm trying to generate more sales. I'm trying to do these things. And so I'm going to stay focused and accountable through community in staying on mission for what this season looks like. And when you have that accountability, you're like, okay, at the end of this, I gotta hit this. And so everything else, it can't be perfect if I'm gonna reach these goals. It's gonna just have to be done, and that's okay.
When I started the permanent makeup business, I was like a perfectionist to the max. And I think it's like a double-edged sword because it can help you, but it can also like kill you slowly. Like the burnout of spending 6 hours on doing someone's eyebrows is intense when I started. So I think in one sense, like the perfectionism helped me get the skill to an excellent level that then became like a word of mouth. People loved my work, but then it became very tiring because even though I was constantly improving my work, for example, the very first client that I did, I spent 6 hours doing her eyebrows, just so terrified and scared that I was gonna mess up her face. And then later on, as I started continuing the education to perfect the skill and get better and better, instead of like getting faster at it, I was like, how much better can my work be in those 5 or 6 hours? And I would just spend all the time. So I would only take 2 clients per day, but I burned out so easily and I was just completely exhausted. So I think functional is good, having a really good result, but being aware of like, okay, for me, I'm gonna be honest, I still struggle with it. I'm obsessed with having good quality work in whether I'm designing eyebrows or a home gym. But I think you do have to realize like, okay, if it's gonna take me X amount of time, I have to set a limit on how many clients I can take or how many people I can serve, so.
Something that I see at a high level in business that is a problem I think everybody deals with, especially as entrepreneurs, creators, if you're a visionary, is the balance between change and stability. So you need to have something stable for it to work, but if you have new ideas, then you're introducing them inherently, you're creating change, you're creating something that wasn't there before. So especially for visionaries, you have an idea that you want to bring forward, and so you have a lot of ideas that you want to bring forward, but at some point you have to say no to some of your ideas, and you have to say no to those ideas so that you can say yes to the core idea. And so especially with that packet that you guys, or that handout that you have, really focus on how do I stay consistent? Because we'll write down goals, we'll write down things that we want to do, but 90 days from now, do we follow through on that? And so the best way to follow through on that is to say no to the new things that come up. And so what I've done for me personally is every 90 days, I create a new plan or a new strategy, but then I try to stabilize that strategy as much as possible and not change it again until the next cycle, so that I can create a plan that I follow through on before then pivoting it after the fact. So that allows me to be stable while still allowing for change. Does that make sense? Let's get some audience questions. We got a little bit of time. Yes?
Could you repeat the 4 laws or whatnot that you mentioned earlier?
Oh, the 4 laws. So the first law is make it obvious. The second law is make it easy in its simplest form. The third law is make it attractive. And the 4th law is make it satisfying.
Any other questions?
Question, how do you share your ideas? Sometimes exposing your idea to someone else doesn't feel safe.
I think I get past that by you just have to do it. I think the challenge there is that the question, just to restate what you said, is how do you share your ideas, right? I think when you're not vocal about the idea, it's hard to get feedback on it. And so it's never going to be perfect. And I think of it like you have to put in the execution time to the idea, so with somebody else. And so if somebody else, like this is a conference, right? Somebody else could run a conference. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to execute it the same way. And so it doesn't matter if somebody hears the idea, the execution has to be a part of that. And I think in order to build a community or build a message or market, you have to be able to share the idea first.
Yeah, and I would add to that, like, it's your calling and God placed it in your heart, and so you're going to approach it from a way that no one else is going to be able to take from you. And so if it's born from who you are and the dream God placed in you, then even if somebody tries to do something similar, it's never going to feel the same because it's not their calling. To Sasha earlier, it's them watering the wrong plant. They're trying to water your plant, and that's not going to produce in the same way.
And I'll also add to that that once you do your idea, I think that's an important part, as you were saying, is you actually have to put it into action, because then they're behind if they want to copy or whatever. And not only that, but you have to actually claim it. I think a huge thing for me when it came to going to Divergent U was realizing that I have to say to myself and to other people that I'm a businessman, and I have to claim it. I have to say I'm a videographer, and I have to claim it and share it with as many people as possible, with my friends. And so whenever they're referring to different people, to potential clients, they're like, oh yeah, I know a videographer. You have to claim it and make that synonymous with your name in a way when it comes to who you are as a businessman or a businesswoman. Just, you have to claim it and you have to do it.
I would also add to that and say to keep in mind that at the end of the day, only God can judge you. And I feel like we all get caught up in the judgment of people and like, what are people going to think if I tell them this idea? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. If God is telling you to share your idea, then share it. Like, the reactions to people will be what they are, and you'll move forward with that. Either it'll be a failure and you'll learn, or it'll be a success and you'll move forward. But at the end of the day, I think it helps me at least a lot to just recognize that only God can judge me, and I know if I'm following my path, then I don't have to worry about what people think. I mean, I want to connect with people, but we shouldn't be worried about each other's judgment as much as God's.
So kind of go off of what you're saying, how would you say that you guys temper that feeling within yourself when you do perceive that what someone is receiving from your work leads to rejection from them? Like the feeling that comes from it, because it's one thing to know that God is only with the judging, but the feeling is still there. So how do you guys temper that for yourselves?
It's a good question.
My best friend told me, hey, Alex, I think that 80-20 home is never going to be successful. My best friend. That hurt. Like, that really hurt. I was like, damn, she doesn't believe in me. But it's not that she doesn't believe in me, it's that she genuinely doesn't think that my idea is going to work. And the way I process those emotions is I went through the motion of like feeling that. It's still something that I don't bring up to her because I know she doesn't believe in it. So what am I going to do about that? I can't force her. I'm not going to try to change her mind. That's going to be a waste of energy. But at the end of the day, I appreciate her for telling me how she really feels. And I still love her, and like that's all you can really do is just sit with emotion. But at the end of the day, it's up to you to execute, to water that seed, and for you to take action at the end of the day, because it doesn't matter what people say. If God puts something in your heart, like there's a purpose behind it.
I would also say practice makes perfect. So like just the more you put yourself out there, the more comfortable you're gonna get, you're gonna feel with rejection, especially if you're doing it constantly. And if you get a lot of rejection at a certain point, like say you're applying for a bunch of jobs and you get rejected 50 times, at a certain point it's gonna be like, I don't care. Like you can reject me again, it's fine, but I'm gonna keep trying. This is the path. So I would just say, yeah, just keep doing it. Don't be afraid to just continue despite whatever people would say.
Yeah, I think it's also important to receive feedback. So sometimes criticism isn't bad. Sometimes criticism is necessary. And so it's not all criticism is coming from a good place. Somebody might be tearing you down, but somebody might also be giving you feedback to lift you up. And so like know how to sift through that and I would say surround yourself with many different voices that are giving you many different perspectives. So you're not just getting one piece of advice or one point of view. Have multiple mentors, have multiple people that you talk to about your ideas, have multiple friend groups that you're sharing these ideas with so that you're getting different feedback rather than just harping on one person's feedback. Or take that feedback, say, okay, I received that. That's important. I hear what you're saying, and process like maybe they're right. Maybe there is something about that I need to change. Maybe not though. And so like be willing to take that feedback and sift through that for yourself. But the way you do that is by getting multiple perspectives. If you hear the same thing from 12 different people and you haven't heard anything else, it might be true, right? so get multiple pieces of feedback.
I think the converse is also kind of terrifying. It's having somebody say yes all the time, like, oh yeah, that's quite the best idea ever. Like, man, that's amazing. But like, you kind of want feedback at the end of the day. You want, even with rejection, I think what you really want, and it might hurt, it would hurt for me, to say why. Definitely just ask them why, because that helps you understand why people aren't seeing what you see. And if you can clarify something a little bit better, or if they have any ideas about it, I certainly think it's not just, you're not being rejected for no reason. I think there's a reason that they have, and it could be invalid. You wouldn't know unless you ask.
Yeah, I think for me, rejection often comes because I'm like rejecting myself rather than allowing somebody to reject me, and so I don't make the ask, and I have to remember like the worst they can say is no, and it's already a no because I'm not asking. So if I ask like and they say no, nothing's different than if I hadn't asked. And so, and best case scenario, they say yes, and so Sam says this to me all the time, like, what's the worst they're gonna say? No, like, that's not bad, it's already a no. I'm already not working with that person or talking to that church, like, that's true now, so the best thing is that they get to say yes. So that's always a helpful reminder for me.
Any other questions? Last question, Simon. We'll two more questions, Simon.
How do you discern between the yeses and the nos? I know for the yeses and the nos, I know for Sam, you have a real strict criteria for your student. I know for Rachel, vetting churches might be the difficult thing. For Alice, I know jumping into different systems and learning how to train people rather than just giving out the service is a huge leap. So how do you discern between some of these yeses and some of these nos?
I think you have to start with the yes that you're a yes to. And that's something that before you worry about the yeses and the nos of rejection of the world out there, you have to figure out, what am I a yes to? Like, what is it that I want to pursue? What is my calling? What is my purpose? And then defend that. And then it's no to things that aren't that.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say like be clear on what you're looking for, who you want to partner with. This just happened recently where somebody reached out and they wanted to partner, and I had a pretty clear vision of like what partnership looked like, and they came back and it looked very different than that. And so there was temptation there to be like, oh, should I change the way that I partner with organizations? Should I adjust my rules? And I had to just like really sit and be like, no, like, did I make those rules from a place of prayer, from a place of like feeling like that's what God had told me to do? If that's a yes, then that person's not the right person for me, and the right person is coming.
Yeah, I think a confusion is an indicator that that's a no. Like, confusion, no.
God's not a God of chaos, so it's never chaotic.
We have one more question.
How do you get committed? I think a lot of people have an idea, somewhat of an idea of where they want to be, whether it's right proposal, but it always says something like, I'm thinking I want to do something kind of like, or something in the, what, you know, obviously, you guys need help to get really specific and really clear to access that you need to like, take action and start moving.
Yeah. I think developing clarity isn't something that you will reach. It's not like clarity is like, I'll get to clarity. It's more like you are clear about something. Like you're clear that there's a pull this direction towards this particular calling or this particular idea, and it's more about cultivating the expansion of that clarity rather than looking at how do I get to clarity over there. Like clarity is not something you'll reach, it's something that you already have. There's something in you that you know is there. You don't know what it is exactly, and maybe the edges of that or the expansion of that isn't clear, but you know the seed of it to some degree. And so I would worry less about what's out there and focus more inward on what am I clear on? What is clear to me? And how can I start taking action and sharing that more and talking about it more to receive feedback, which will then start to shape that, expand that by taking the action around it. So start with what makes sense, what is clear, what is unique about you, what are your callings, what are your gifts or your ideas that you know, and then start to expand from that point rather than seeking clarity over there, if that makes sense.
I think to expand upon that too, a good way to ask yourself that is just ask, like, what do I love? What's in my heart? And then figuring out, maybe the 4 or 5 things that you love to do the most. And just pouring yourself into those things. And I think a lot of times the ideas come naturally from God when we just are aligned with what we love.
Start with what you can do, and I think you'll find your offers or your what you're actually selling, if that's what you're referring to, along the way. And I think that the only way of doing that is just by doing it, just by figuring out what you like exactly. It might be something unexpected in the process. For me, I loved filmmaking, and I didn't know how to I didn't know how to translate that into a business. So I was like, it's something like video and photography, but I'm not too sure because I also like writing. And then I just realized something I really like to do is just pick up a camera and record and tell a story with it. And that's really how I've gotten myself into videography. So I can relate to that to some extent, but I think the first and foremost, the thing that you have to do is just start.
I think that's a perfect transition into our next segment, which is a video that Matthew created. So please give a final round of applause for our panelists.